The last time I celebrated Mario Day, I got miraculously healed on my left knee after 3 people prayed over me. This game better be just as good. Happy Mario Day, my friends! This is Paul, and tonight I'll be reviewing for you
Mario vs. Donkey Kong
for the Game Boy Advance. Now, I played and beat the remake of Mario vs. Donkey Kong when it came to the Switch, and I liked it quite a lot. I didn't really like the mini Mario levels, but the rest of the game was pretty good, and it ended up being my number 8 game of 2024. Even had my editor Esabelle dress up in a costume to announce it in that video. So I was really excited when the original version of Mario vs. Donkey Kong was announced to be coming to Nintendo Classics, because I wanted to see if the remake did a faithful job of capturing the old spirit, or was this a really bad game that was in need of a desperate touch-up. Now let me be transparent and say right off the bat, there's only one thing that I like better about this original version than the remake, and that's the voice acting. Most of it. In the original version, Jen Taylor was the voice of the Toads and not Samantha Kelly. And honestly, the two are pretty similar. I think Jen Taylor's performance is just a tad bit higher pitched, but really the Toads don't really talk a whole lot, they kind of just screech, so that's kind of a non-issue for me. I don't really have a preference one way or the other. Donkey Kong, on the other hand, I am so glad that the remake got Takahashi Nagasako to re-record all of Donkey Kong's lines, because in this original game, they just reused a bunch of old Grant Kirkhope lines from Donkey Kong 64 and then added in a few stock monster sounds, which I think were actually the Abominable Snowman sounds from the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer stop-motion cartoon. Let me know if anyone's watched that. And it sounded awful, especially in the boss battles. They would just reuse that same sound effect and same chest-pounding animation 3 times in a row before the boss battles would even start. And the lines just felt so out of place, like they were recorded for a completely different game, and I guess they just couldn't figure out how to get a new voice for Donkey Kong in time, which is ironic because I'm pretty sure the very next year was when Takahashi started voicing Donkey Kong. Now, Charles Martinet, he is the real star of the show here. Play the clip.
Hello, it's me, Mario. Woohoo! Baby Mario, let's go! Yahoo! Luigi number 1. Ho ho! Mario, I'm coming. Luigi. Wario, have a rotten day. Yahoo! You gonna eat that garlic? Everybody goes before me.
While I am very grateful that the remake kept in Charles Martinet as the voice of Mario, I think I kind of prefer how they did him here, at least in the cutscenes. In the main gameplay, Mario's voice clips are for the most part ripped directly from games like Super Smash Bros. And Super Mario 64, and again, they sound very out of place. Like, they were recorded earlier and were from different games with completely different feel to them. So I was really grateful that the remake used some of Charles's more recent lines that you could probably stick into any Mario game, and they seem to make a lot more sense. But it's in the cutscenes where I am just overjoyed that Charles was given a chance to do a lot more talking than what Mario typically gets. In fact, I would probably say this is the most talkative Mario's ever been in the history of all the time Charles voiced him in the games. Here's just a few examples of what he says in the cutscenes that didn't make it into the remake.
Hey, come back here. No, you don't. No, you don't. What are you doing? What's going on here? Oh, mamma mia.
If I had to guess what the dev team's priorities were when making the remake, it was probably to make Mario sound a lot nicer, as a lot of the stuff that he says and does are kind of mean to Donkey Kong. Now, admittedly, once you get past the credits and go into the post-game, you do see a softer side to him that is more consistent with the rest of the Mario games, but It is a shame that you don't get some other iconic one-liners. But now that we've gotten into the good of this original version, let's get into why I think this is vastly inferior to the Switch version in literally just about every way. For starters, the difficulty. It starts out pretty easy, especially since I had already played the remake. I was able to whiz through the stages and even handstand jump over certain obstacles, and it was a lot of fun at first. The problem is that these are puzzle platformer levels and not just strict platforming. So you have to think about, I see the exit, it looks easy to get to, but navigating past these obstacles without taking a hit is the hard part. But as the game progressed, there were two things that really frustrated me about this original version. And that was the fact that there was a timer, and the fact that you only could take one hit and you'd have to start the entire level over again. Now, in fairness, a lot of these levels are very short. Some of them fit the entire screen. And as someone who tends to be more of the journey over the destination type of a person, I found it easier in the remake when I turned on casual mode to just ignore the timer and explore the level and try out different jumps and tricks, and I figured it out over time. Whereas in the remake, the timer kept stressing me out because I'd get so far into the level only to miss one step, and then I'd have to start all the way over again. Thank goodness I was playing this on the Switch too, so that I could rewind. I don't think I would have been able to make this review if I didn't have that feature, and I feel so sorry for those of you that played the original and had to keep replaying those levels over and over again. As far as I know though, you don't have to restart the entire world again, you just have to restart the level. I think the way the remake handled it was a much better compromise, as there was a casual mode option where you'd get a checkpoint flag and you'd be able to take 5 hits before you had to restart the level. So it allowed for more of a trial and error focus, which is really good for my type of brain. That being said, the remake didn't have the rewind that this version did. Maybe I'm just bad at these types of games. The footage that I'll eventually film for this will probably tell you the answer to that. But I do appreciate that the original has a really good difficulty curve. Like, it starts out really easy, but then towards the end it gets pretty devious. Not quite lost levels of tough, but it feels like each world doesn't ever feel like there's a spike in difficulty, except World 5-3. That one was a real piece of work, but every other level feels like it was a natural progression in the difficulty getting higher and higher. I also think the music is, for the most part, pretty darn forgettable and sometimes even ear-grating. Donkey Kong's boss music just got on my nerves because there was this high-pitched note that kept playing, and if it hadn't been for the remake having real instruments, I probably wouldn't have even recognized these originals or been able to hum them or point them out to you, because they're so compressed, because it's on the Game Boy Advance. So not only are they not fun to hum to, but they're also just boring. There's no substance to them. And Game Boy Advance games are capable of having really great music. Just look at Minish Cap and both of the Fire Emblem games. This game is just not one of those games. Now, in fairness, I do think this game controls pretty well for the most part. There were certainly times where it felt like Mario's jumps were too locked in for my tastes. Like, in the Mario games, you can kind of correct him in midair, and in this, you really have to commit to the jumps. Also, because this is played with a control pad and not a control stick, there's not really a run button, which, again, the level design seems like it's made with that in mind, but there were times where, since I was playing it on the Switch too, I pushed the stick just a little bit too hard, and Mario went way further than I expected him to. But these problems were also carried over in the remake, so I don't really think there's a definitive controlling game. It's just that the quality of life updates in the remake were considerably easier to get used to. I also feel like the production values in this game are kind of all over the place. Like, the cutscenes are stop motion instead of like fully animated 3D, and I get it, it's a Game Boy Advance game. And to be fair, the stills that they have do have some really great 3D models, but it's once you get into the levels where you start to see the primitive nature of everything. The enemies just look off. Like, they don't feel like the traditional Mario designs, but they don't feel like a throwback to the more expressive enemies in Super Mario World either. They're kind of just there. And they make really weird sounds. Like the thwomps just sound like someone is trying to imitate the sound in Super Mario 64, but is not a professional voice actor, so it comes across as very amateurish. And the backgrounds, again, they kind of feel like they're just there. I do like being able to chain moves together. And since I was already familiar with the remake's control scheme, it was a lot of fun to figure out the best moment to do a side flip and a handstand jump. And once you knew how to get to the exit, it was a cathartic feeling. And it was especially lovely whenever I would just skip getting all the presents in the level and just get straight to either the key or the mini Mario, depending on the level. And I like that there's this aspect of natural speedrunning built into it that doesn't make you feel like you have to be a professional. Now, in my review of the remake, I complained that my least favorite part of the game were the levels where you control the mini Marios. And this version is no exception. They are just as bad as they were in the remake, if not worse, I think. Because it seems like, I don't really remember what the AI was in the remake, but it seems like you have to use very precise movements to get the mini Marios where you want them to. And if you go the slightest bit out of bounds, you'll hear them say, "Oh Mario! Oh Mario!" over and over and over again. And it is insultingly bad. I love Charles Martinet, but they really couldn't get another line that the mini Marios could have said, or just had them shut up. Like, there is an icon that shows you where the mini Marios are in proximity to Mario. Why couldn't they have just kept it at that? Maybe had him say, "Oh Mario," like once. And then you're like, okay, I get the picture now that I have the icon. That would have been my ideal way of fixing it. The mini Marios do have a use though, and they give you extra hit points in each of the Donkey Kong boss battles at the end of the worlds. And these are kind of forgettable. Like, honestly, most of them boil down to grab an object that Donkey Kong throws at you and hurl it back at him when you have an opportune moment. Not really offensive, but not really memorable either. At least there's not that stupid ice boss battle that was in the remake. At least I'll give them that. And the final battle was pretty alright. It was reminiscent of the original Donkey Kong in all the right ways. Even if I had to abuse the rewind feature, because I'm not used to this version's standard difficulty. Overall, Mario vs. Donkey Kong was a game that was fun at first, but got frustrating later due to the time limit making me panic a lot, and the one-hit nature of the levels just felt a bit too punishing. Yes, they're usually really short levels, easy to see everything, so I guess you could say I'm overreacting. It would have been nice if there was maybe like a way to get just a couple more hit points, like maybe if you could take 3 hits or even just 2. Like, give me something else besides the insta-death. There's also other little things that the remake ironed out, like there's a score counter. I never paid attention to the score counter. And Mario gets hurt if he falls from too high, and you have to restart the level if you fall from very high. So fall damage is something I'm not the biggest fan of. Games like Tears of the Kingdom do it really well, but here, just doesn't do it for me. Now, if you're getting this on Nintendo Classics, I do feel like you're getting a good value, because the expansion pack has so many other great games and benefits that this is just a nice bonus, and you could see it as like an unofficial demo for the remake. If you end up liking this old game, you're probably gonna love the remake just as much. The remake does technically have a demo, but it's only like 3 levels long. Whereas in this, you're getting the whole game as a demo. There's way more of Charles Martinet's voice acting in the cutscenes, but you could also probably just watch them on YouTube. You're not missing much seeing them in context, because the story's kind of more of an excuse to string the levels together, as opposed to it making or breaking the game. Like, if you remove these cutscenes, you probably wouldn't lose anything, but you'd also lose a lot of the personality that this original game has. Overall, Mario vs. Donkey Kong is a decent game. The remake is a bit more decent, neither of which are great, but they're good enough platformers if you're looking for something different than Mario's usual side-scrolling outings. Now, I haven't looked at Game Boy Advance prices in quite a while, so I don't know what this game is going for now if you buy it secondhand if you don't have Nintendo Classics. But I will say that as far as what price I would pay for it if I wasn't able to rent it or if it wasn't on Nintendo Classics, I'd probably say something like between $10 to $20, because there's 6 worlds, and there's, I think, 8 levels in each world, so it's a fairly long game, but I still beat it in like a day and a half. So it's not a very long game. It's not very replayable either. There is a post-game, and the post-game is pretty long, so I've heard. So if you're interested in the extra hard levels, then that might be something for those of you craving a challenge. But if you want more of a relaxed encounter with much better graphics, with real instruments, and a couple of brand new worlds, I would highly recommend the remake. But this would be more of a curiosity tool, or if you're a stickler for the original, then you got it. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know if I was unclear on anything, and if you have any questions. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!